make my mistake. If you see one of those things, uniform or not, you do not hesitate. You take it out, or you run. Got it?
The Resident Evil 2 remake made me feel a lot of things. Many of them were to do with being petrified, but the surprising one was the feeling of comfort. Returning to the Raccoon City Police Department, despite being dark and full of zombies, it's like being back at home. Resident Evil 2 relishes in its familiarity, but twists your expectations in surprising and clever ways. This is not a simple remake. It borrows the premise and setting of the original, but this is absolutely a brand new Resident Evil, and it's the best the series has been in over a decade. I liked Resident Evil 5 and thought that 7 was fantastic, but I'd be lying if I said I hadn't been a little disappointed in every entry following 4. After all, how do you follow 4? Well, the answer is apparently to go back. Resident Evil 2 returns to the formula and structure of the original game, but it implements just about everything that's worked in the series into one consistent package. You have the Metroid-like interconnected world and tone of the original games. You have controls similar to 4. You have sub-weapons like the first Resident Evil remake, and you have the horrific lighting and atmosphere of Resident Evil 7. It of course leans mostly on Resident Evil 2, but if you've ever loved a Resident Evil game, there'll be something in here that you recognise. Well, maybe not 6. But if you have only played the action games, then prepare for a rude awakening. You will not be able to shoot your way through RE2, and it makes that evidently clear from the word go. Ammo is sparse, and zombies are plentiful. There's no way you can take them all down, and considering you revisit rooms over and over, you're going to need to be mindful of just who you take down. And considering this is both Leon and Claire's first adventure, you can't just suplex zombies here. Even accuracy has been greatly gimped, requiring you to come to a dead stop for precision shots.
You bastard!
And it all works so well. I was a little worried how they'd take level designs and environments designed for a fixed camera and make them work in a third-person perspective, but they made it work. You move differently, zombies move differently, and perhaps most important for achieving this, everything is designed differently. You'll of course see some familiar rooms, and some areas are nearly one-to-one, but everything else in between feels brand new, and the way you approach them will feel fresh to veterans and newcomers alike. For instance, the door on the left, where you'd usually start your adventure, is locked. Instead, you have to go right. Then when you finally do go left, you're anticipating a licker on the wall, only there's nothing to be found. So you're on edge the entire time, waiting for that licker to show up. You know it's coming, but you never know when. This suspense even carries over to the post-game second playthrough, where you take control of the other protagonist, only your playthrough begins much later into the course of the story. If it were just the remake's puzzles and items, it wouldn't be so bad. But because it takes place later in the story, that means Mr. X is already on the loose. So you're being pursued by an invincible tank, all while you try to explore rooms you foolishly thought you were familiar with. It is terrifying. Mr. X also showcases what a feat this game is in terms of sound design too. There's nothing more terrifying than being in a secluded room and just hearing knowing he's outside and can slam through the door at any moment. Don't be too intimidated by him though. He's not all that prominent in the first playthrough and only really shows up when you're familiar with your surroundings. But man, he's something else in playthrough number 2. The A and B scenarios aren't quite as connected as they were in the original games, but you will get a slightly different experience playing Leon and following up with Claire than playing Claire and following up with Leon. There's a ton of reasons to keep revisiting this adventure, and that's just one example. Despite everything being dead, the police department still feels lived in. All the desks and belongings scattered around remind you that people had lives before the outbreak, and the few notes left around, while intended for puzzles, organically add to this sense of world building. And yeah, this is a puzzle-focused game. The world's essentially a ball of string that you have to keep unraveling, and the game's hands-off enough that it always feels like it's you making these discoveries. But it also gives you everything you need if you ever get stumped. Basically, if a room doesn't have any more items in it, it'll show up blue on the map. So if you have no idea where to go, check out all the red rooms. You are given objectives, but you're never told how to achieve them. For instance, the first thing you have to do is find 3 emblems to open up an underground passage, but finding out where the emblems are is all on you. Given some people are intimidated by Resident Evil's structure, this balance allows pretty much anyone to play without sacrificing any sense of isolation, and that's really the remake's greatest accomplishment. It ditches a lot of elements that I thought were integral to the vibe of the original, but it still pays respect to its legacy. RE2 delivers horror in the same way the series always has, with suspense. There's a room full of dead bodies that you have to pull out one by one, and you know that one of them's going to have a crucial item, and you also know that one of them is going to be alive. You just don't know which one. At the same time, it's also a game where you can shove a grenade into a zombie's mouth and then shoot the grenade. It's this kind of effortless blend that brings a bit of light into this exhausting grasp for survival, and likewise the characters still hold true to their original values, making light jokes even when surrounded by zombies.
You know what that means?
Yeah. Dinner time.
On the flip side, characters who had a minimal role in the original game have been given a lot more depth this time around, and some characters even have completely different motivations. It doesn't go as far as to rewrite the events, but this isn't a one-to-one remake for the story, world design, or gameplay. There's even new areas, and characters like Ada are given a unique flair to make her more than just an extension of Leon. Do not be put off by the title Resident Evil 2. There are countless differences to the original, not just to the point where it's kind of a new game, but where it is a new game. And it's refreshing to see such changes in an era where PlayStation games are just being updated graphically. As a lifelong Resident Evil fan, Resident Evil 2 gave me everything I could have wanted and then some. There's still a place for tank controls in game design, and the original is still my favourite in the classic series. But this is how you do an update. Everything feels great, and more importantly, it feels right. I loved reacquainting myself with the police department, and I loved seeing a new side of characters who used to be little more than one-liners, and I love Mr. X's fashionable new hat. Resident Evil 2 is terrifying, rewarding, and thrilling. Capcom coined the term survival horror, and Resident Evil 2 reminds us that they still absolutely own it. This is the best the genre has been in years. I love the Resident Evil 2 remake. It's everything a remake should be, and then some. It respects the legacy of the original without being scared to do its own thing, and if this is the template for the series moving forward, then I cannot wait to see what's next. Thanks so much for watching, and of course be sure to subscribe to GameXplain for a lot more on Resident Evil 2, and other things gaming too. Until next time, bye.
This is how we get to Annette.
Based on what you've said, the sewer seems fitting.
Well said. After you.
Gee, thanks.